All right, Talk fans, welcome to another exciting edition of the No Coast Defenders with the, let's say, dastardly duo. I'm here, of course, with Dan Candress. I'm Gregory, and we're going to talk Peacemaker. But before we get into the first 3 episodes of Peacemaker, Dan, did you have any comic media news you wanted to get into?
Hey, check out Naomi. Quite frankly, it's on CW. It's only 1 episode in. I will say the first episode is all over the place, and I think it has to be because, I mean, look at how many universes they're trying to connect here at this point and stuff. But the writing has a lot of promise, I will say. And Zoe and I started it last night, and it's got the suspense, it's got the mystery to it. It's actually a comic arc from DC that I thoroughly enjoyed. I believe it was 5 issues. Really liked it. And I'm curious to see what elements they bring in. And I hope they get it right. But this one actually feels right as opposed to the rest of their campy crap. So I've got that. And then I have the Letitia Wright stuff. So, and I know that we went kind of back and forth on this on Facebook, but for the love, people, stop sending me links that Black Panther is back in production. I know that it says she's involved, but she's not on set. Read the articles instead of the headlines. I've been going back and forth with people for about 6 months on this, and the fact that she pretty much tanked this project for her own stuff in a very selfish manner. So I guess my peace of mind be just read beyond the headlines.
Well, to be fair, she's on a set. She's not on the same set.
Correct. Rewriting is also taking place, and a lot of different productions have been pushed as a result of this. And my hope is that we see M'Baku rise up in the end.
Well, and you were saying about this project particularly, you were going to have questions in your mind about what could have been.
Yeah.
But you were going to have those anyway, because with Boseman's passing, they had to do a rewrite. So who knows?
No. So they had done it the Marvel Knights series is where Shuri takes the mantle as Black Panther.
Yeah.
And I had been calling that since the beginning because she wouldn't be in it for any other reason than to take the mantle at some point, whether it's number 2, 3, 4. That's the only reason to include her. And so I knew that was coming. And so when he passed, I was devastated. I was like, oh, this is going to be really cool. That's a really fun comic arc. And then all of that shit happened, which is why I think we'll see New Panther. So the reason why I go with what could have been, it's that Shuri arc is one of my favorite Black Panther reads I've ever had. So that's why it's the what could have been, because I don't think she'll be beyond this movie.
Well, and I'll counter your idea of the only reason she was in this movie, and I call BS on that because she's also just a strong female character, which is why she was in that movie. And he was going for representation. So,
well, no, they have that with all the women of Wakanda. Like Shuri is a very limited run. Shuri has not been in very many comic book issues. So to bring her in was for the purpose of taking the Black Panther mantle. Like if somebody's read, I think probably every single issue of Black Panther at this point, Marvel doesn't do things unintentionally. So when they did the Shuri series, it was shortly between these 2 films, and it was a limited series. And then when she took over the mantle, it was also very limited. So her inclusion, they have Okoye and Akia, Ayo, all those. So they have very strong female leads. I mean, that's Wakanda. Wakanda is about the door at this point. So that was already in place. Shuri was another piece of that. So I will have the what might have been. I'll also always have the what might have been since Chadwick's gone, because that would have been a great introduction for Aurora, but that's a totally different.
That's a bigger what might have been. Yeah. And we've been talking a lot in this phase as we've gone through. They're not following the comics. So you got to get that what happened in the comics out of your head in general.
Well, I think when it comes to Wakanda, they have. And it's all been
They haven't done Wakanda in this phase, though.
I mean, this phase just started. Shuri was around before this, and Shuri was building up to that with the technology, with the suits, with everything.
Just because she was in the phase before doesn't mean we've been talking about this since WandaVision, that this phase isn't following comics necessarily. So it's drawing inspiration for comics.
But you have to think about how long some of these have been in production, where Wakanda should have already been out, and it was pushed, and then it was pushed again. And the fact that the writing led up to that, and you also have to go to the comic book market. The fact that the spec books don't lie most of the time, unless it's Mephisto. First appearance of Shuri.
Fantastic Four spike as well, and we didn't get Fantastic Four.
Well, that's because people are stupid and they don't know how to actually do this stuff. But as somebody in
So the
both
specs books can be wrong.
as somebody in both niches where I
Yeah.
make a shit ton of money off of this, and have connections I'm not really allowed to say because they want to keep their jobs. Shuri was intended for one thing. This entire movie was rewritten after all that stuff was done. My only letdown will be not seeing that Shuri arc that I was hoping to see as that role. I mean, I was talking about it since I saw the first Black Panther. I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait till Shuri's Black Panther, as much as I love Chadwick. And they cast somebody young enough to do it. So I think they're going a different direction now, hence the rewrites, hence Ryan Coogler even mentioning he didn't think he had enough time to get out the movie he wanted to at this point.
Yeah, there's been mixed message on that because he also said it would not get pushed. It was going to be done in time. So
it will be done in time
for the release. So
it will be done in time. There are 5 projects tied to this one. And so that's that. And he's the one in charge of all of those. So
yeah.
Winston Duke has been everywhere recently, which is why I think he's going to be the guy we take up the mantle. But I've also been seeing Deadpool 44 skyrocket in price, where Killmonger's on the cover as Black Panther. So there's reasons for these, and there are leaks that occur to lead to these things. So
yeah,
I think we're more likely to see M'Baku than Killmonger come back yet. But I will definitely see. You don't just introduce Michael B. Jordan and then say see you later after one film. So
yes, I will agree with you there. I don't have the connection to Black Panther you did, but like Letitia Wright was fine in the role. It's a great character. I thought she performed that character, probably was the least of those powerful female women I was interested in throughout that movie. So it doesn't bother me. And as I told you, like there's been plenty of people on green screens and the performances were fine. Mm-hmm. So, and who knows, like maybe she'll come around and still get vaccinated. There's a lot of time still.
Oh yeah, it's not that. It's the movie has to come out at some point this year. And to be honest, I was really looking forward to her relationship with Riri, because that's Zoe and I have really connected over those comics, Riri and Wakanda. And so I wanted to see that go beyond this film. I just really don't see that happening at this point. I truly, truly hope I'm wrong. But based on certain things, I don't think I am.
Yeah, I honestly don't think it'll be missed too much, because I think Coogler's going to do something anyway. And the fact that he shot everything else but her scenes makes me wonder how much he could have rewritten anyway if he was still going to.
Well, it rewrites the mantle. Who takes that over? That's the big thing.
Yeah, which the movie's still going to be great, and that's all that I care about.
Yeah, I just, I got.
Well, honestly, if she's not going to get vaccinated, I'd rather she be on a green screen instead of on the set in Georgia. Like,
yeah, I can't believe any of them are still shooting in Georgia, but that's a whole other situation. But
tax incentives.
I know the Panthers in my heart. You know that.
Yeah. So I have a bit of news as well. So the X-Men 97 series is in production right now. Mm-hmm. Have you seen anything about that writer's room?
I thought they were all returning for the most part.
Some of them are returning, but Brubaker is the one running the writer's room.
Oh, really? No, I didn't see that. That's cool.
Yeah. Brubaker is going to be running the writer's room, and he said point blank that the original X-Men animated series is what got him interested in comic books. That's why he's in there.
Yeah.
And how much I love Brubaker. So I saw that and I'm like, you know what? He doesn't need to be like the writer on a script, but the fact that he's running that room just means everything for me. And also just means they're going to probably put a focus on just that gritty storytelling that we want to see, because that was what the big draw of the original series was that it was grittier than a lot of things. So
yeah, that's season 1.5. If he sticks to that theme, that'll be great. The reason why I wasn't so excited about it when it was announced is I think a lot of people think about the theme song. Yes, Amazing Ropes You In, but they forget that the rights and all that shit were being sold like midway through that series. And so when you try to watch the last 2 seasons of it, when it was under a different production company, I think they were getting paid in pizza. You watch that, it's like, this is fucking awful. And so if we can get that original feel to it, I'm all in.
Yeah, well, and the original thing had so much going wrong with them. They created the morph character just to kill the morph character. That's literally what he was created for, was to kill him. But then fans loved him, And so they had to find a way to work him back in, and
Yeah.
it became convoluted, terribly so. And but I mean, death and resurrection in comic books are just what we come to expect, right?
I mean, it's just those were the formative years of like me growing up. So like I remember the Pizza Hut single pan pizza with the comic book and all that shit. And so nostalgia is definitely gonna play a part for that. I just hope that they, they stick with that run. And well, now we need to see what happens with Professor X after he found love instead of staying with everybody and shit. We have to go with those terrible broken storylines if we're picking up where we left off. So I'm curious to see where it goes.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they can write that shit. But we've seen, I mean, Brubaker's one of those guys in comic books when you give him even what's been a terrible story stuff, like he can fix it. I mean, so I have faith that
he's a visionary. He's definitely he's one of those guys that's on my short list of people where if he's involved, I'm in.
Yeah, and they're probably going to go with that same cast of characters. I mean, they have brought in a lot of this original voice actors to do the characters, and even like other characters they didn't do. So like bringing that. So, but I'd like some more gritty street characters, especially if you're going to have Brubaker running that writer's room. I just don't know who it would be.
We've been waiting for Gambit for so long. I'd be cool just seeing him brought to that screen, just.
Well, and I mean, Gambit's popularity sprung from the animated series. So he's definitely going to be there.
Yeah.
But I guess they could explore more of the Thieves Guild. I know they did an episode that kind of touched upon it, but not too much. So they could do a whole, like, you could make Gambit like a whole beeline story that ends episodes. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. We could do the Hellfire Gala. We could do a lot of stuff. And I mean, I don't think it's unintentional, but as we're kind of getting into some movies where a first appearance would make sense for some of the X-Men, exploring the Mystique Rogue stuff and things like that would really make a lot of sense, especially with Marvel's coming out and everything. If all of this is tied in, connected some way or another, that would make perfect sense, to be quite honest.
Yeah. And I think they should introduce some of the younger X-Men too, but I don't think you need to introduce a lot of them. Because you have Jubilee, who is like part of that core thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe you just pick a handful of just the new X-Men. Pick 3 new X-Men that aren't Cypher. Not that I mind Cypher, I just don't see him working in that cartoon environment.
I'd almost like to see him bring Dazzler over, have some sort of involvement there, kind of thing. Because I think she'd be really cool to get involved too.
Yeah, I wonder if it's going to be the thing, like, the reason they didn't introduce the Fox series didn't introduce Gambit, right?
For when they did the show,
when they did the movies.
Oh, I thought they really couldn't find the actor because they had him in one of the movies and he was awful.
No, they didn't want to make him a main character because his powers were too similar to Cyclops visually and his attitude was too similar to Wolverine. So basically, Fox decided that we weren't smart enough to know the difference between a character with red flashing lights. And so I'd wonder the same thing about like Dazzler and Boom Boom.
Yeah.
Would someone at the studio level be like, well, those characters are so similar to Jubilee, and they're not, but I could see them making that. Oh, will the kids know? And
I kind of hope they bring back the Morlocks for us too. But yeah, I just, me with animation, I'm not huge on it. I was initially excited about it. Just because of nostalgia. And then I was thinking back to, I did the rewatch a year and a half ago when all this stuff started. And I was like, oh, wow, this show is really bad after the first like 26 episodes. So I'm hoping they pick up where a place where they can actually have a congruent story and give us something solid, I guess. And I'm wondering which, if any, arcs they're going to pull from. X-Men books are just always taking off, but Mr. Sinister seems to be the place where folks are starting to really get into it right now. So I'm curious to see if we get that in the animated series or if he's going to be a villain down the road instead in the movies.
Yeah, I mean, he was a big villain in the animated movies. It was like Mystique Magneto, Sinister. Those were the three villains, I think.
Yeah.
I did my rewatch right when Disney Plus launched,
Mhm.
but I did it after I did my Gargoyles rewatch. And Gargoyles, of course, shifts in that last season when it becomes the Goliath Chronicles,
Yeah.
but the quality is still there even with the shift. So when I then went to X-Men, as soon as like the voices animation changed, and I'm like, oh shit, that's right. I'm done. And there's a couple storylines that I enjoyed in that later, but I couldn't get past the voices and animation. And I was like, yeah, it's not worth finishing this rewatch. Let me do some Darkwing Duck. But yeah, that's all I really cared to talk about that I saw for news. So let's talk some Peacemaker.
Yeah, what a hell of a show.
Yeah, so good. I would have been okay with one episode at a time, but it feels like it took to the third episode for it to really get into that groove.
Mhm.
So I think it was probably a smart idea because I wonder how much of the audience they would not have retained if they only did one or two.
Yeah, I almost felt overwhelmed by having all three, to be honest. And I don't know why. I think it's because like I loved number one, but I also loved how absurd yet all in your feel Suicide Squad was. And this has that same mantra, that same feel to it. So I loved it from the second it took off, with him questioning, like, can I just leave the hospital? And he's having a conversation like smoking weed with the custodian. Like, I mean, just these small things. And I have not always been a fan of John Cena's acting, but I've watched it improve so much over the years. And now watching him just own this character so much, I don't know, man. You feel for him on a level where it's like you shouldn't, but you do. And it's interesting because the connection between him and the rest of the cast is just so great. And yeah, I don't know, the humor, the timing, it's great. I mean, Laura and I watched the first three and I told Lauren, I'm like, I really think you'd like this. It's like your brand of humor pretty much. And she's sitting there laughing on the couch. And then she's like, oh, wow, that sucks for him and stuff. It's just such a fun time.
Yeah, I'm curious to do a rewatch because over on the Ringerverse, they did a 10 questions thing. And one of the things they said was, did the jokes go too far? Because I think one was 60-40 on the jokes hitting versus not, and the other was the reverse 40-60. So they basically, as a duo, went like 50-50. And you mentioned the gender scene, and one of the only things they said is that went probably just too long. And they wondered how much of that was Warner not putting a restriction on James Gunn. So he could just stretch out the joke to where it was beyond it hitting. I don't mind that. You know me, I'm a huge Conan O'Brien fan. So like,
yeah,
there's a point where a joke goes on so long that it's gone from not hitting anymore to hitting again. And I think for me, that's where Peacemaker hit. Like,
and that's James Gunn.
Yeah. And so I could see maybe for the person who wants that more restrained studio James Gunn, yes, I can see how some of those jokes stretched a little further than they needed to.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the entire cast is so likable that it doesn't affect too much at all. You're just going to keep going with it.
So, I mean, the brand of humor in this, my three favorite in the game right now are Taika, James Gunn, and Ryan Coogler. And so for me, like, I mean, this hits all the check boxes for me. I know for some people it's not their flavor, but the casting is great. The callback to the absurd Suicide Squad movie is great. I find it interesting that I absolutely loved that movie, and a lot of the DC fans I know were like, that movie was trash, but it was right up my alley. And so the callbacks are great. I mean, the stuff with Eagly, like, holy shit, this man has this connection to this bird, like the just crinkled bag of chips. Like these small things. After watching a second time, I'm noticing just how much the brevity is there, though. Some of those jokes do go on for too long, and some are just, you blink, you miss them. And there's a lot of humor in this and a lot of humanizing in this as well. And a lot of self-deprecation, and they all blend very well together. So I love the conversation about him killing more minorities. And he's like, okay, I'll kill more white people. Like all that sort of like shit. It's just,
yeah.
I mean, it hits on every level, and I get that the humor may not be for everybody, but It's nice to have a DC show that's not taking itself so seriously that the screen is completely dark, the story is completely dark, the characters are completely dark, and it's about how are they going to come back for this redemption from this awful shit, as opposed to like just going to fly by the seat of my pants. And I'm all for it.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the crinkle thing, but really, the crinkle thing was a good joke. But when Hardcore is shocked and says, "Wait, you feed your ego chips," that was where the punchline hit, and I thought that was perfect. Like it didn't need any more. Like Cena did not respond. I guess Peacemaker did not respond. But about the Cena thing, how much is it that Cena's acting's improved versus how much his ability to pick his roles has improved?
I could see that, or at least they're writing for him. He's always been very flat to me, and this is the first time, especially that dancing scene, that was great. This is the first time I really connected with him outside of Suicide Squad. I loved him in that movie. I've never disliked his acting. He's an awesome person too. I've just never connected with it where I'm like, wow, that was a great performance. I think the only other one I liked him in was what was the Amy Schumer LeBron movie there?
Trainwreck.
Yes, I enjoyed him in that.
Well, and that was a good one for him. But like, I wonder about this because there's this thing where the best wrestlers play themselves just turned up a notch.
Mm-hmm.
And the stuff I've liked Cena in is exactly like that. Like in Trainwreck, he is literally playing Dolph Ziggler, a fellow pro wrestler who Amy Schumer dated and became like part of her act, was talking about sex with Dolph Ziggler. And so he's playing a wrestler essentially in this, even though it's not said, but he's playing a guy he spent a lot of time in the ring and the locker room with. And then I think like I really liked him in Vacation Friends. I don't know if you saw that one. Mm-hmm. But he's just playing this ridiculous, like absurd guy. And I'm like, you know what? You kind of are a ridiculous, absurd guy. And I don't watch the Fast franchise, but I heard people pan the character, but I think it's because he was trying to be a serious character.
Yeah, I stopped watching those long ago, but you know, I think for me, there's a certain level of douchitude that somebody gets to where it's like I can't watch the character regardless. And then there's the one where it's like a recovering one. And so I see a character willing to change and willing to be different. And I see the self-reflection coming out in it. He's one of the few wrestlers who I've actually followed over the years and stuff. And you know, I appreciate it. And I appreciate the comedic chops, but it's almost like he actually, I don't want to say took some lessons, but like really looked inward into how to deliver a character, you know, beyond just reading a script and being like, oh, you're the muscles and stuff like that. And for me, I think this is the first time he's really put himself out there and been vulnerable as a character. And I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, because playing the exact same character in the Suicide Squad, he was not as vulnerable and did not put himself out. He definitely is more in tune to the role. And did you see the video TV Guy did of Gunn and Cena talking about the soundtrack?
Oh, I didn't actually.
Yeah, it's a great video I shared in the newsletter this past week. And it's just the two of them talking about the music and Gunn about how he writes the music in and had to find it. And that he thought long and hard about what Peacemaker listens to. And he decided on hair metal simply because like who the father was and how he was raised. He's like, you know, this character, his father was disappointed and he got punished for listening to hair metal. And Cena talked about how much that music selection helped inform the character for him. So, I mean, the scene where he's dancing with the magic wand is perfect because that's like Cena listened to this hair metal and was like, okay, this is that character. Mm-hmm. And he got into it. Granted, Cena acting like an idiot in his underwear is nothing new for him. So,
right. No, that was just, I don't know. That was like a moment of clarity too for this character, which I think was important. And then it's, as we saw, like even in that first episode, you know, every time he thinks something's normal for him, it's not. Like, can this man ever experience normalcy? And, you know, it's those subtle things of, all right, so I can't just walk out of, because it also has a lack of consequences. So it's like, all right, I can't just walk out of here after not serving my sentence and get away with it because they're going to find it at my house. I can't just hook up and have a one night stand because it's going to turn this way. So it's like this man can't have any normalcy, and they're normalizing that too. And I just think that like the psychological elements hit on this show very well, but I think that they're ignored in the absurdity, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What do you think of how they portray Adrian Chase in this series?
It's all right.
It's interesting because, I mean, you're not a big DC guy. I'm hit or miss with DC, but I can't really think of many vigilante portrayals in the comic book. So I'm most familiar with Vigilante as a character.
Mhm.
In this season, he was the big bad in Arrow.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, this vigilante is completely different than the
Took a
vigilante.
turn.
Yeah.
Took a turn.
And it fits better with the show, obviously. Like, but it was just it took a minute to get used to, but I think it really, really worked, especially once you introduced Judo Master. And I'm like, oh shit, yeah, this is good. I mean, the scene of Peacemaker and Vigilante destroying appliances, just
That's
great.
great. Yeah, that was one of those that caught me a little off guard. And to be completely honest, like I don't know a lot about Peacemaker. And it's funny because my wife, Lauren's even like, hey, can I get the trades? And I'm like, that's not that kind of character. So I know of him, I know the story, I know the arcs enough about these folks, but the vigilante we got is not the one I expected. It does fit. But at the end of the day, there's only so much absurd you can take at once. And so I'm wondering if in the full scheme of things, I'll like the character a lot better than I do currently, which is why I'm kind of reserving judgment, because when it comes to Gunn, he's very meticulous in everything having a place and a purpose. And so that's the downfall of having a week by week series as opposed to a full project from him, because certain things just stand out or don't quite make complete sense until you have the full picture with them.
Well, that's what I love about weekly series is that
Yes.
you have to experience it. Like there's some time to think about it. I think what I really liked about just the dynamic between Peacemaker and Vigilante is how delusional they both are in their own way. Like Vigilante's like he's cleaning the trailer for Peacemaker while Peacemaker is lying on the couch, which is a very delusional thing. But at the same time, like Peacemaker is pretending, not even pretending, he's probably convinced himself that Vigilante's not his best friend.
Right.
But then you see them in the woods together and you realize, yeah, whether you want him to be or not, Vigilante is your best friend. And it's interesting, like we see a lot of how delusional Peacemaker is, but to see them together and how their delusions about each other are both right and wrong, it's kind of an interesting dynamic. And I was into that. So I'm curious how that relationship is going to work out in the entire cast.
I did find the buildup to be great though, like from the scene at the restaurant working up. And I mean, even it's like that abortion joke, like, yeah, it went on a bit long, but I found myself laughing at that, like the delivery of this actor, I'm not familiar with his name, is just so great. And it did catch me off guard to the point where it's like my initial watch, I'm like, is it absurd to be absurd or whatever? And then, my second watch, I'm like getting way more into it. So yeah, I definitely, I think I'm going to enjoy this character a lot more.
Yeah, I think I'm looking up his name right now because I also don't know it. Wow. Since I watched those episodes, he's moved further down the IMDb list.
Oh.
But yeah, that whole dishwasher scene was kind of perfect, which is wonderful. Freddie Stroma. Yeah, I wasn't familiar with him in anything. But I guess he's been in a lot of things I've seen because he was Cormac McSomething in Harry Potter. He was Luke from Pitch Perfect, so I don't remember Luke at all in Pitch Perfect.
I don't either.
So he's been in a few things, and I guess he was in the Suicide Squad as Adrian Chase. I don't remember him being in it, so that's how little he mattered before this series. So good for him. What about Daniel Brooks' character? I'm forgetting Leota, being Amanda Waller's daughter, plus the implanted Amanda Waller spy.
So I loved her in Orange is the New Black.
Yes.
And I was disappointed in the first episode because I felt like she wasn't used much. And granted, that's how it's going to be. So by the end of the third episode, I was like, shit, this is great. I hope I see her in everything DC at this point if they really want to get it right. I'm intrigued by her role because I think they're showing her as a person with a lot of heart too. So it's like she can go through with all this shit. She'll shoot anybody she needs to, but like she's still got a lot of heart. And I think it's going to come to her crossing Waller in the end to do what she thinks is right. But I really enjoy her as an actor, to be honest.
And that's an interesting thing because you somehow, even if all we get is Amanda Waller in the Zoom call for the end of that one episode to make that reveal, this is going to push Waller's character without having to pay Viola Davis to be in this series.
Viola Davis money.
Because we either find out that Amanda Waller loves her daughter and just wants her to have a job, or we realize that Amanda Waller shouldn't turn her daughter into her by sticking her in this undercover off the books operation with a bunch of psychos. So it's interesting how by getting this character, we're going to get her mother's character who doesn't even need to show up again.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It's, you know what? Part that bugs me is they keep trying to push this Waller thing in various levels. You know, they did it in the CW, they do it here, and they never seem to do it well. And even Viola Davis being just the force that she is, I love her so much. They've misused her so much so far that I kind of wish they've distanced themselves from it a little bit and bring her back when they know how to use her, I guess, because maybe this is it. And if anybody can do it, it's James Gunn. But I mean, they've written Viola so terribly thus far.
Yeah, well, she's been fairly one-dimensional. I know they've used her to like intertwine, like she's the linchpin, but she has not. The character is not charismatic to be. Viola Davis definitely is, but the character of Amanda Waller in this isn't quite there to linchpin things. I thought she was much better in the Suicide Squad, better than Suicide Squad. Mm-hmm. But I honestly feel like most of the character development came with what she did, not what they had Viola Davis portraying in it, which is kind of unfortunate. And then once again, we're going to get that like character development pushed further without her on the screen. So
yeah,
you almost are spending too much money on such a great actor to not let them do the work. Like you could put a broom with a wig on it and have that be Amanda Waller the way they're doing it, which Amanda Waller's not an easy character because I thought she's used fairly well in like the Justice League animated series, but not every episode that she appeared in was that great. Like sometimes they just make her
this overarching influence.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately sometimes people, especially I think men writing a female character, they just make them too one-dimensional. And I think that's what we've seen a lot of.
Yeah, and they went completely deadpan with this character, and it's just not fitting the theme for me, especially with how Gunn's movies are and shows are. I just I'm hoping there's a turnaround. You know, I mean, there's plenty of time still. And
yeah, you can be like the badass boss, but also like make a joke as you're being a dick to someone.
She has, I mean, just her range is just unlimited. So I would like to see them actually use it. She's one that I really, if she's attached to a project, I always check it out. So I'd like to see them actually utilize her in the correct way.
Yeah, my hope is that they do a movie sequel towards the Suicide Squad.
Yeah,
because it'd be interesting seeing that squad that demanded their freedom to keep this secret to really butt heads with her, like make her the villain for them instead of just like the quasi villain.
Yeah, no, I could totally be down with that.
And then you can have her show some range as she's butting heads against the reformed heroes, I guess, or I guess reformed villains, now heroes. If that's what they're really going to be, who knows? Maybe they
we'll
just
see.
become
We'll
a mercenary group in the next one. So
we'll see how it goes.
what do you think of the ensemble of the cast as a whole? How are you feeling about them?
Love the chemistry. I mean, the arc with the dad is just one that's I think is going to be very interesting. I think entertaining in a way that we don't see in a lot of projects anymore because it is a bit daring. But as a whole, the relationship between all these characters is great. The chemistry is great. It's a lot of actors you wouldn't normally really care about, if you see them in a film or a show, but they just really make it work, and nothing missed for me in terms of the dialogue, the connection. I mean, even the bar scene going back and forth and that fight scene, I don't know, like nothing's grandiose about the show as grandiose as these characters are. It all fits. It's all, I'm not gonna say tastefully because of the jokes, but it's everything just works. It's in sync. I mean, it's really, really special and great, and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I was really impressed by Annie Chang. I know she's done a good mix of comedy and drama. Like she was in the Fox 911 series, as well as like the Jim Gaffigan show and Master of None. So I think she's kind of perfect to be that lead detective, just because she could straddle that line. I think the way she sold that calling Augie Smith, Robert
Boone.
Yes. Well, called him Fork.
Yeah.
And then the debate of Spoon would have been better, but like he didn't know, like all of that. I was like, man, that was masterfully acted.
Yes.
And I think that's just something you didn't need to have someone like be able to do that for what could have been a throwaway line.
Yeah.
But well, and that's perfect.
That's those things. There's so many subtleties to this show. I have a couple friends who are big DC fans, and they're like, they hate it. They're like, this is awful. And I go, man, if you step away from like the fandom of whatever it is you're looking for and just watch this as a show, it's masterful. Like it's everything you could want in one. And the interesting thing, and James Gunn specializes this, is a lot of these are throwaway characters, and he's giving them life. And so, yeah, I'm sorry, it's not your Flash, Green Arrow, Batman, whatever. It's a different set of characters, and you can be into it and still read whatever you read or watch whatever you watch because it's great.
Well, and let's be completely honest. I think before the Arrowverse, I know we got Green Arrow in Smallville, but Flash and Green Arrow were not big names, I think, until, I mean, a little bit towards the animated Justice League stuff, but I feel like I'm a bigger fan of Arrowverse than you are. But people, I think, really, I think people like define what those characters should be in media based on those shows. And that's really not how it should be. I mean, remember, we have a Barry Allen in the Arrowverse who's kind of more Wally West at times than Barry Allen.
Much more Wally West. And Wally West is nothing like Wally West in the Arrowverse.
Yes. And then, although I really like the Wally West in the Arrowverse, I'm kind of sad.
I enjoy that Wally West. Yes, it's just not Wally West.
Right. And then, of course, like Oliver Queen in the Arrowverse is basically Batman.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the characters are very similar in the comics books as well, but I just feel like Batman's more manipulative in the comics and less open about his arrogance, whereas the Green Arrow thing, like he's very cocky and open with his arrogance. And I kind of like that better, to be honest with you. I think it's a better character, which Batman stands are going to hate me, I think, but
no, I can't stand Batman for that reason. So, but if you look at it, I hear constantly a lot of folks like that verse and stuff. They're like, everything's so much the same and we need something different. So it's like, here's your chance to have something different, not have too many connections to it, not even really have to rely on comics for it. Just sit back and enjoy what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is just a bit ridiculous. Like, it's interesting to note because you know how I feel about many of the DC projects and what that studio is doing with them and everything else. That Suicide Squad movie is actually like in my top 5 comic book based movies at this point. So that says a lot. And it's interesting to me that it's like all the DC folks who, not to put on blast or anything, I've still probably read 10 times more DC than they ever have, even though they are fans. They're like, I hate it, it's awful, when it's actually pretty true to how absurd the creation of the Suicide Squad was to begin with. Like, have you read it, or are you solely just focused on what's on your screen? Because there was a time in all of these movies and shows where many people were actually going to the source material, whether it was an omnibus or a trade or something, or even fucking Wikipedia, to get it. And now it's just like, are we strictly going for things you're viewing on the screen? Because certain things are just spot on now and you're missing it.
Yeah.
And I hate that for people.
Well, I for a while was reading all the Batman titles. I think Detective Comics was my favorite when they were going back, and like it was out of the continuity of the rest of the Batman titles. And it was just Batman being a detective. And I think that was the best. I'm like, yes, I want 6 issues of Batman trying to figure out Freeze's scheme without us having to go into the greater thing. But for me, I know Batman sells more comics, but I'm like, I always prefer The Outsiders versus Batman and The Outsiders.
Yes.
I just think it's a better team without him when it's literally the quirky outsiders. I mean, that's what that book should be. I prefer Nightwing and Robin in solo series than I ever do as them being sidekicks to the Batman series. And it's just like, I get it. Like, he's hugely popular, but these characters are better on their own without Batman. And I feel like that's just DC's problem in general is Batman's their break glass in case of emergency, but they do it before there's an emergency.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's just some people, I think, like Grant Morrison, I think, is the great example as a creator who, once they started doing the 52 and like they gave him complete control of the Batman world and chased off other writers and sent them to other comic book companies, it's just like, why would you do that in the middle of runs for them, for Grant Morris, who's literally should have just stuck to like writing Frankenstein, making him like a good supernatural character in DC, because I quit reading Batman at that point. So
there's only one arc I've read all of at this point pretty much, and it's 1989 for the 4 issues or whatever we had, just because my guy Billy D. Williams is in there. So
that's fair. I read Under the Hood or Tales from the Hood or whatever, the one we were reading, just because Tim coming out. But of course, they even that's something we discussed, like they even blew that up to a crazy extent when it was Tim questioning his sexuality versus
so
fully coming out. And honestly, I think the questioning the sexuality thing is way more interesting. But when
the outrage was just so stupid,
the outrage of that stuff is always stupid. I mean, same thing when Kal-El's son came out and all of a sudden the press is like, oh, Superman's gay. And it's like, no, Superman's son, who I guess is also Superman, is gay, but your Clark Kent is still your stupid 1950s idea of the American appeal. Like,
yeah, I mean, you want some gay, go check out the New Mutants. Blow yourself away. You read them, you loved them, and it was all in front of your face. So
yeah,
fuck them all.
The idea of, and it shouldn't have been just a Batman's like collection of stories shoved in there. It should have been a Robin story.
Yeah.
Where the character should have been Tim, his ex Stephanie Brown, and that's it. Like, that's all you needed. Like, something wasn't right between him and Stephanie Brown, and now he's questioning his sexuality, which that is a good nuanced story that they shoved into smaller arcs.
And look how easy that is.
Yeah. Now, granted, there probably still would have been the same outrage, but at least it would have been a more nuanced story, like more befitting. I think people forget that Tim Drake was the Robin to get his own miniseries and then ongoing series. Like, he got 2 miniseries and an ongoing series. That was the Robin.
Yeah.
And I honestly feel like, and I know like we got a Tim Drake Robin later in the Batman animated series when they kind of changed animation and stuff. But the Dick in that Batman animated series was as much Tim Drake as it ever was Dick Grayson.
Oh yeah.
And that's a reason, because I mean, I think those are the two best Batman characters. So I think Stephanie Brown's right behind them, and like, look what they've done with her.
Yeah.
She's been Robin. She's not been Robin. She's become a joke about her joking about them forgetting she was a Robin. So it's just, but that Stephanie Brown thing is because it's a nuanced character. And
Yep.
it's one of those, I think there's a study now that people say movies have gotten worse, but it's actually a true thing, is movies have gotten worse, and it's simply because of finances. Creators are afraid to be original and create content because financiers don't want to take that risk anymore. And it's because you have to appeal to like the masses. And unfortunately, comic books have to do the same thing because you need to get that distribution up. And so nuanced characters become a niche thing, which is why so many creators are going the indie route and not Image Comic indie routes. They're literally going to create their own distribution companies. So I don't know. It's just interesting. And I think we're seeing how successful you can be to adapt those things to the media. But at the same time, Netflix has kind of proven it doesn't always work with the Millerverse they're doing. And Mark Miller's just a wonderful creative guy himself. But so far, Netflix purchasing that has not quite worked out. But I don't know how much that's Netflix isn't willing to let it develop.
Right.
It very much become one season. If it doesn't become a social media blockbuster, we might not develop it beyond that.
Right.
But The Kissing Booth gets multiple sequels, which isn't to knock The Kissing Booth. I thought it was a great like teen romance comedy, but the second one became really terrible, and I didn't make it through it, so I'll never try the third one. But it's interesting. I think hopefully The Walking Dead kind of started like, oh, we can make some money off these comic adaptations. The Boys and really stepping up that next step. So it'll be interesting to see what comes. Like, there's going to be so much more. But you'd mentioned the Suicide Squad being in like your top 5 favorite superhero movies. Am I crazy to think back to Blank Man and how that might be one of my top 5 favorite superhero projects?
I love it.
I thought about trying to rewatch it the other day because I'm like, man, I loved Blank Man, but I have not rewatched it since the comic book movie boom, and I probably should.
There's a lot of those out there too. You know, there's even a lot that I've forgotten about. And one that I will say does not hold up, unfortunately, is Howard the Duck. I rewatched that recently, and God, I was allowed to watch that way too young, and B, holy shit. I love the comics, love Howard, and to be honest, I'll still probably watch it once a year at this point now that I found it in my box of DVDs. So,
well, for any of our listeners / viewers younger than us, they might not remember a time when CW was just WB.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and UPN, I guess, but who had UPN? Like, no one.
Oh, I miss UPN with Moesha. That was great.
I looked In the House with LL Cool J, but I only caught it in syndication. But yeah, WB didn't have original. It was all syndication, and I felt like it's Saturday afternoon movie rotated between Dick Tracy and Howard the Duck all the time.
And Earth Girls Are Easy.
Yes. Another campy classic that I probably will never rewatch, but yeah, I mean, even I have to rewatch it, but the Spawn movie, definitely for the time, but thinking back on it, I'm like, yeah, that's what a DC movie wants to be. It's dark, a little bit edgy, but it's not depressing.
No, that movie was a lot of fun. It doesn't hold up. I watched it recently too. Because Zoe's enjoying a lot of these older things too that I'm bringing out. And so I screened them first. I'm like, I know that I was cool with it, but like different times, different talk, and she repeats everything. So yeah, Spawn's a couple years down the road, but it doesn't hold up, but it's still, you're right. It's exactly what DC wants to be at this point. And in a lot of ways, it's what's being done with Peacemaker. So I find that very interesting.
Yeah, well, visually is not as dark as Spawn for Peacemaker, but like the content wise is maybe even darker.
Kind of like the no holds barred sort of thing. And that's where they need to go. And I don't know. I think a lot of the folks these days, if they do read, it's the rebirth shit or the, I don't know, 26 lines of Batman going. And there's a lot more DC content there that's a little earlier on you can check out, or just sit back and enjoy it as a show. Like, don't even attribute it to, you know, whatever company is producing it and shit. Just sit back and see if you like it or not for what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with some things you're going to know what the style is. So like you mentioned, you'd watch that first episode of Naomi, and I will get to it, but you very much know Greg Berlanti's company is producing it. Now, granted, they brought in a very different creative staff for that, and it was correct. They brought in the right creative staff, in my opinion, before I've seen it, just like seeing that creative staff for it. And I'm like, yes, Davari is the right person
Yep.
for this series. I think they're also making a good move there. They've made no bones about the fact that it will be fully connected to the Arrowverse eventually, but it's not jumping in with, there's not going to be crossovers. I don't think the first season, I think they said there was going to be no crossovers and no giant connections. And I think that's
I didn't know that Ava was connected at all until I saw the title screen. Like, I just knew that I love Naomi in the comics.
Yeah.
And the second I saw Ava's name, all of a sudden I like tapped Zoe. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be great.
Yeah, it's gonna be so good. Who created the Naomi character for DC?
You know, I knew it like right before this episode.
I did too, and I was hoping you'd know and not have your mind blank.
No, give me a second.
I remember like details.
Brian Michael. It was Bendis.
Okay, yeah. That's right.
Yeah, that's why. And you know what? That's why it was on my radar to begin with. Because when I saw that Bendis had a new arc coming out, I picked it up just instinctually when it came out, and that's why. Yes.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, DC brought Bendis over to create.
They poached him from Spider-Man to do the Naomi thing.
Yeah, well, it wasn't just Naomi. If I remember, the original deal was he was supposed to create a few younger characters and more diverse characters, and she was the first. I thought she was going to spring load and introduce others, but who knows? Things change quickly.
I think initially they brought him to I kind of rebrand Static.
Okay, yeah.
And I know they got into production with that, and then it got delayed, and then all of a sudden he had a different arc, and then all of a sudden TV shows are talking about it, and so as it happens, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why Naomi and I clicked to begin with, because I saw Bendis was on it. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm there.
Yeah, it's interesting that he's become like a go-to create diversity character, because I think
he's just able to take even an already known character and spin it into a different web, you know, and that goes a long way, because there's a lot of characters that you don't have to necessarily reinvent, but you can change the trajectory without doing so, or just here's some new shit, take it. And because he's attached, you know, it's gonna be great.
Yeah, he just nudges them the right way, if anything. And
yeah,
and it's also not saying I think you should just go with any white guy who knows how to create a character to make your diversity characters, but he's got the clout to pull it off, which I think is, and he's established enough that he's like, hey, we need some diversity in Spider-Man. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And but he's also paying enough attention to know that these are issues. Like, he's listening that these are issues, and good for him.
Yeah.
So I think, speaking of diversity in Spider-Man, did you see Tom Holland's comments about the Spider-Man?
Which ones?
About specifically bringing Miles into the live action.
I saw that he said he couldn't play Spidey forever. That was kind of the end of it.
Yeah, and I still haven't seen the movie, but like, it's impossible to not know a lot of what happens just by being alive, I think.
At this point, the memes are there.
Yeah. The memes and the headlines. But he did an interview that said, like, while filming, and seeing Andrew and Toby as well, it just kind of hit him how Spider-Man hasn't had the diversity it should.
Yeah.
And that was just, I was like, good for you to come out and say it, because you're 100% right. Like, not that they haven't brought in actors of color to play different roles, or, I mean, Jamie Foxx Electro's being a black man was good, but like not being Spider-Man, when I don't even think it's arguably at this point anymore. I think it's just a fact that the most popular comic book Spider-Man right now is Miles Morales. Like,
Yeah, I mean, Miles Morales Spider-Man is there, and he's one where they didn't even change a character. They weren't like, all of a sudden Superman's this, just in a different universe. They're like, yo, we have Miles Morales.
yeah,
So the guy has to be Spider-Man, and built that universe around it where they didn't recycle all the villains. They didn't do all of that, and yeah, naturally some of them are there, but they changed a lot. And I mean, to be quite honest, it's really hard right now with the rights and things like that, with Sony doing their thing and the Spider-Verse and all that stuff, to really flesh it out. And I will say 6-7 years ago, I'm like, oh man, I want Donald Glover to play Miles Morales. Well, now we know we're gonna get him as Prowler at some point, which is cool. Yeah. Or maybe we won't, and that was just an Easter egg for to have one, but it might not happen. But I really just it's necessary. We know what's going to happen. We know that, Kamala's coming, America Chavez is coming. We see the younger cast coming, which he's going to be a part of. And to be completely honest, I wouldn't be surprised if he's introduced in more of a Champions sort of fashion, as opposed to Spider-Man, marquee, which is a fun way to introduce him as well with the pre-existing characters. But I think Nova is going to probably come before him too. So it's interesting to see which route they go. But I mean, I love Tom Holland's take on that. And to be quite honest, for a lot of the younger people right now, Miles is Spider-Man. Like, it's not this Peter Parker thing. So I mean, I know a lot of kids like Zoe's age, and Peter Porker is a bigger deal than Peter Parker. So yeah, I mean, it's time for Miles. It's just a matter of working out the contracts, and you know how I feel about the current Sony and Disney deal. I hate it, but
yeah,
to get a good Miles will be awesome.
I agree. It'll just be really, really interesting to see how it comes. We got way off topic of Peacemaker, which isn't too surprising, and I'm not mad about it.
Peacemaker's fucking awesome. Watch it, everybody. It's great.
Anything else you want to say about Peacemaker before we completely nip the topic on the butt till next week?
I don't think I'm going to have a good take on Peacemaker until the final bell rings, to be quite honest, and not in a negative way. Just this is one of those full picture kind of things, and I'll have my thoughts each week, but I'm just really excited about where it's going. And to be honest, you know how I feel about a lot of these DC projects, and much of it has to do with the studio and not the books. And I'm happy to be excited about one of their projects finally. So I'm really pumped for this.
Yeah, I agree. I also think it's, and we'll have to see how the other feature films are coming on, but like, I love that the Suicide Squad had a different tone than Shazam had. Mm-hmm. And obviously Shazam Fury of the Gods is going to keep that same tone, but be more, the scale is going to be larger. And then Black Adam is going to have a completely different tone from anything else too. Now it's going to be darker, obviously, but like, it's definitely going to have a bigger, different tone. Even, I know not everyone liked it, but Harley Quinn, like, I liked the Birds of Prey movie. I think it was done a big injustice by being connected to that first Suicide Squad movie. Yeah. But like, what a great idea that like your main cast is primarily female, your director, writer are female, and the entire soundtrack is all female. And I like the cartoon aspect of it. I thought that fit perfectly with Harley Quinn, especially the way the movies portrayed it. So
let me get a James Gunn, Chloe Zhao team up on that one, and I'll be fully in. No, you know what's interesting? You talk about the tone, you talk about all that stuff. These actors are now interacting with each other on social media. They're having fun with things, which we haven't seen. It's, you crank out a movie, it's done. Like, yeah, we see the press tours and stuff when the movie's coming out. How long has The Rock been talking about Black Adam? And then we got Shazam over here talking shit this whole time, like Zachary Levi and stuff. Like, they're going back and forth, they're talking about it. And This is the first time I've seen any of these cast members actually have fun with each other when it has nothing to do with a project that's coming out in 2 weeks. Like it's a very different feel. And seeing Gal Gadot and Dwayne Johnson team up in other films and things like that now, which I'm not going to talk about the films, they're bad, but seeing them actually enjoy each other and team up and knowing that they're going to interact with each other, like that chemistry is just
him and Reynolds fighting to get her equal pay since she's had equal billing in the film too. Like,
yeah, which is awesome.
Yeah, good for all of them involved.
Yeah, I just wish they made a good movie with that one, but
yeah,
I don't know, man. It's a different feel, and that's what I've been trying to tell people, because I know I have my hate for a lot of these DC films, and I think a lot of it's warranted, and I don't think it's by way of the actors, but there's a renewed energy that seems to be there, and there's this just camaraderie that's forming that we saw a lot with the MCU early on. And as far as the DC stuff is going now, it's almost like they're not necessarily focusing on this world building of how can we connect all this stuff to get another Justice League. It's how can we make these projects stand alone, be great, and then bring folks together when we need to, which is absolutely what they've needed to do. It's what's been lacking this whole time. And that's why, like, even in Peacemaker, where they're talking about fucking fish, I'm like, that's great, because now you're related to Aquaman, but it's not forced on our throats kind of thing. And so I really think they're moving in the right direction. I think they're trusting in the directors. And it's nice to see the actors finally have fun. Like, that's been missing this whole time. So I'm excited where it's to go. I'm hoping to enjoy many projects.
Yeah, it's very, like, the way they're interacting is very reminiscent to like that original Avengers cast, and how much fun. And I mean, the greater, like, throughout, I think, the first 3 phases, that cast really kind of grew together and bonded. You can tell they're having a good time together, and that's reminiscent. But you mentioned the fish fucker thing. Apparently, Warner Brothers is okay with that, but would not let them say Batman's a pussy. Yeah. Which goes back to like how protected and overused Batman is, because that's exactly something any of those characters in the show would have said. So yeah, let it go. But yeah, that's an interesting thing. All right, one thing before we go, I have a show idea that I came up with last night. So as you know, I'm kind of going back and reading up on comics from the last couple of years, and I read a lot of the X-Men stuff, even though not a lot of it was good. I mean, New Mutants, and really that was it for me, I think, and Hellions. But I've just now started with the Spider-Man run that started in 2018. I think Nick Spencer's the writer on that. And it's back to basics, which I kind of hate. I hate how often they do that with Peter Parker. But at the same time, like, he'd also gotten more ridiculous and unrelatable, so they kind of needed to bring it back.
Just give me Old Man Parker.
But one of the things I did like is they had the Kraven hunt thing, because every few years you have to have a big hunt from Kraven.
Yep.
And they had a whole like in between issue of just Gibbon. And I'm reading that and I'm like, this might be the best like Peter Parker storyline I've read since Superior Spider-Man, which wasn't even necessarily Peter Parker. It was him inside the brain of Doc Ock inside his body. So, and I'm like, this is what I want. I want an animated series that takes lesser known characters, and 3 or 4 episodes. So you can do 3 or 4, do 3 characters a season. And so, yeah, give me a Gibbon story. Like, what a great story of a guy who doesn't want to be a bad guy. He just gets angry when he's laughed at. Like, that's relatable.
The Martin Blank saga.
Yeah, it just, there's so many great characters that we don't use that I'm like, yeah, you could bring in different writers for an arc. Yeah. I mean, we both liked Hitmonkey so much that how many other characters that maybe don't deserve a full season or even a full series, but we would love 3 or 4 cartoons of, like, just a small, like, 1 issue worth of material for it.
Well, if you ask Zoe, we need a Lockjaw in the Pet Avengers series yesterday.
That's coming. Like, I feel like that's coming. I think one of the smartest things I heard about Peacemaker was with Eagly. Mm-hmm. That is the recipe, is you have a cute animal sidekick. And I'd heard Grogu lumped into that, and many people will take offense to Grogu being lumped in as like animal sidekick.
Right.
But like the idea of a tiny, cute sidekick is more of the case there. But yeah, Pet Adventures is coming.
Yeah,
And
I think it is.
We're getting Gator Loki.
I think so.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I just thought like, man, as much as I like the idea that we're going to get all these characters blown up into series, like we don't need it for everyone. There's so many great characters that, and I think that's what a lot of the old, like, I think the Amazing Spider-Man or the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon in the 90s did a really good job of using secondary Spider-Man characters. Maybe they'd only be in one episode, but you liked that one episode for those characters. And
Oh yeah,
there's just definitely something there. But I definitely want Gibbon.
I could get down with that. That'd be a fun one. And it's actually fun when you get stuff that's not so well known about the screen, because fans aren't like, well, this is how it looks, or this is how it's supposed to be. It's like, well, who the fuck is that? And just take it, you know? So I could definitely, I support the lesser known stuff more than the, you know, the goblins and Sandmans and shit. Like, let's get the lesser known stuff so that we can get rid of this toxic fan crap of wanting a certain thing.
Well, I think Sandman reminds me a lot of Cyclops, and how depending on who's creating it, the character changes a lot. I mean, because when Cyclops is written well, Cyclops is this great nuanced leader of a character, and Sandman's this great sympathetic villain when written well. And it's just not often that he is written well.
That's very true.
But even like someone like Lizard, who I think is one of the bigger known and overblown, but like if you did just 3 episodes of Lizard and you told a more nuanced Doc Connors story, that's it for me. Obviously, do more than just Spider-Man characters.
Yeah, if they actually did it well. Yeah.
You'd mentioned Dazzler earlier, and I think Dazzler would be a great like 4 or 5 30 to 40 minute episodes of something. Like
if you gave Gary B a Dazzler series, I don't think he'd ever leave his house again. He could die. Right, that's his favorite character, so that'd be amazing.
Yeah, she's another one who's just so nuanced when you do her right. So
yep.
Same thing with Boom Boom. I think just the iterations Boom Boom has gone through, like, yeah, there's just so much there that they could be doing. We'll see. I'm of course speculating. I don't think we'll ever get something like that, but
why not?
Could be fun. All right, got some plugs? Some Gary B plug?
Yeah, Gary B, the casual comic guy. Hit him up on YouTube, and always check out Greg's Full Points.
Yeah, and we will be recording. Well, I was going to say tomorrow, but when you listen to / watch this, it'll probably be tonight. We'll be recording, but it'll be up tomorrow. So with the Battle of the Ballads, as we honestly, this is kind of the last episode, Battle of Ballad. We have like kind of a blow off episode after that, but
yeah,
then we move on to something else.
Yeah, many projects.
Yeah.
All can be found out of the Panel Comics.
Yes, which is on the YouTubes.
It is.
Which is a video website, I believe, right?
I shall see you soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Dan.